was lucky enough to be born into a family of healers. So I'm fourth generation doctor of Chinese medicine, 5 elements, so very the more esoteric kind of way of walking with the Tao, as we would say.
That was nice. Thanks. I love doing that one. Well, thank you, Kat, for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on here. I want to sort of get you on here because I've attended your workshop since, I think it's 2018 onwards. I think it must have been 2018.
Yes, yeah, it would have been, yes.
At the old Tiger Boe.
Yes, long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago, where you ran a community sort of well-being area as well for acupuncture, tweener and stuff. Yeah, my dad's even been there as well. He's had acupuncture.
Yeah, we got a lot of family members.
Yeah, it was brilliant. But I want you to kind of tell us a bit more about yourself, like where you're from and a bit more what you do and where you do it. So we'll just start with you, your background and how you got into, well, how you got the gift and how it came about.
It kind of wasn't much of a choice for me, really. I've always had, well, it's called a gift, and I suppose it is. It's not always a gift. So I've always been highly attuned to everything that is unseen. I was lucky enough to be born into a family of healers. So I'm kind of fourth generation doctor of Chinese medicine, 5 elements, so very the more esoteric kind of way of walking with the Tao, as we would say. So I was very lucky in the sense that I was brought up in a household like that, so it was never having cowpole or anything like that. I was, raised on Chinese medicine, and I understood how that worked as a lifestyle, how it actually just folded out into reality in that sense. So I decided, I think as many people do when you're born into a family and it's like, well, you're doing this in my kind of teenage years and so on. I went and did music because that's my other love. I know that's with you as well. So I was fortunate again to be born straight into the middle of the rave scene in the UK. So I went and did pretty much the polar opposite of Chinese medicine, and I did a bit of DJing. I worked in clubs all over Europe, Ibiza. I was out in Moscow in Russia, and I got to go and do my traveling. And then I came back in my kind of mid to late 20s. My mother fell ill. I came back to help her. And that was, I guess, my kind of alchemist moment, because she was suffering then. I mean, she's obviously done acupuncture. She's an incredible person. She was one of the first people to practice acupuncture in the NHS, doing palliative care for people with cancer and, end-of-life care and major pain relief, and instrumental in that becoming part of a more westernised system. And she was really suffering and finding it quite hard. So I came back and had to kind of go into the depths of that to help her, and decided to go back to university and study and become an acupuncturist. And it kind of brought me back to what I'd been taught to hide as a child. So I was always that weird kid that knew things she shouldn't know. And my grandmother was very similar to me, but my mum wasn't. So my grandmother was very supportive of it. My mum was, I think still is, a little bit terrified of the whole thing. And I just, I knew things that I shouldn't. And obviously as a child, you don't know when to say or not to say these things. So I think I got my mother into some predicament, to put it that way, by telling people things that they didn't want to know, or sort of knowing the truth and voicing it. But that all kind of came together. So I did Chinese medicine, I did acupuncture, I started Tiger Boe, which was an incredible journey and something that I'll always remember. It was a beautiful place, a community space, somewhere where there was good quality holistic medicine and a variety. And it was always done, as a community centre. So it was a space where it was affordable as well, and it was for the masses. And that's the beauty of it. I mean, much like you're saying, we had so many people who they came in and then the whole family came in, which is how healthcare used to be even in the West. The doctor knew everyone, you knew the family. And it was a beautiful healing space, in that sense. You'd get whole families coming in and having acupuncture together in the community room and having a chit chat, and it would be actually really good quality time for them as well. And I don't think people realise that it was not just about the healing, but building communities and family and connection. And that was an incredible success. I did all the courses and I started to kind of move and shift into my own, back into my kind of more energetic work again, which is, I think, where we really kind of came into contact, doing the energy awareness courses. And yeah, I've kind of diverted a little, I guess, and carried on with that stuff now in my own sort of path. And so Tiger Boe closed just before lockdown, and it was a decision I made a couple of years before. I think with many people with a successful business, people expect you to continue to grow and grow and grow. And it had got to the point where I spent more time running a business than working with people, and I began to miss that, because that's why I went into it, and that's where I feel my gifts and what I wanted to bring to the world laid. So about 2 years before the contract was up, I made the decision to start closing the business. And I was very lucky because we closed, I think, maybe a week before lockdown. I think it was a couple of days, to be fair. And so, yeah, which would have wiped me out anyway. So I kind of walked away scot-free from that, and then moved out of Nottingham during lockdown to go and be in the countryside, which was the best thing I could have done. I was lucky enough to be, it was so quiet where I was. There was never more than 2 people in the shop anyway, so nothing ever really changed. And then in 21, I think, in the break between it, I moved down to Stratford-upon-Avon. I was in town, and I moved to a little village, and then we've just come back to Stratford Old Town again. So yes, it's very nice. It's lots of bars and restaurants. But it's all Shakespeare tourism, so they're all tucked up in bed by 10 o'clock at night. So we get all the kind of benefits of the prefix A. And Stratford's beautiful, it's obviously I was in Nottingham. It's very, very different to Nottingham. It's very nice here. There's rivers with big manicured gardens in the centre of town, and yeah, it's very, very different. But I'm loving it, and it's a big difference. So now I do more of my much more spiritual work. I teach magic, I teach psychic development, and I have a membership, I do online stuff. So it's really, my journey's been about bringing that kind of freedom back to myself, really, and getting back to that one-on-one or one-to-many, I guess, in a certain sense with the membership, but that connection into really teaching and passing on the skills and stuff that I've got.
So when you say you teach psychic development, is that something that people have naturally, or is that something that can be taught?
No, everyone has the ability to do it. I think part of the difficulty nowadays, I've, and I know you've, understood spirituality because, of your Sikhism and everything, is a very spirit-led, much like Buddhism, the veil is much thinner when we're brought up in these realities, so to speak. And you know, it's a real thing with more modern forms of spirituality that people believe you have to have a gift. And I think when we truly understand that we are all the I am, we are everything, we are all part of it all, then of course we have the ability to connect to it, because it's what we are. And that's kind of the greatest secret, you know, to make people believe that you need to have a gift, is the kind of real falsity in it. You know, the majority of people, it's not that they don't have an ability to do it, it's that their mind gets in the way. So, you know, the difficulty is we're raised, you know, in a sense of when we're all young and children, and we see the magic and awe and beauty in nature and the world and our surroundings, we're taught very much that we need to be in the real world. And that's a very logic-centered, rational, reductionist science reality. And, you know, school kind of has a really good go at thrashing that reality out of us. And so the difficulty is that most people don't believe in it anymore, or believe they need a gift, or so many things. And, you know, most of the work is, teaching them skills how to connect, but most of it is teaching people, well, it's, you know, I love it, it's kind of one of my taglines, that it's okay for the soul to be in control. You know, you know, the mind, the way that I see it, and when I teach, you know, is that the mind is the driver, you know, the ego is the driver, it drives the vessel, the vehicle, but the soul is the navigator. You know, our soul can see so much more than our mind or our ego can possibly even begin to imagine. And it's the soul that's connected to everything. But we're brought up in a reality, as I said, you know, with the education system and how we're taught to experience the external world without the internal guidance, that we get to the point where the ego is trying to drive and navigate. And, you know, you can't drive the car and look at the map at the same time, you know, you're going to crash. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people. I think that's why a lot of people are turning to spiritual discourses again now, because, you know, it's not that it was, you know, people say it's simpler times. It wasn't simpler times. It's just that people were better connected to that sense of knowing. You know, there was the doubt wasn't there, the fear, the worry, the anxiety. And so, you know, a lot of the psychic development really is just really teaching people how to begin to shift into a space where they can be led by their soul, rather than, you know, it's something they occasionally get a glimpse of.
And it's quite affirming as well, isn't it? Rather than relying on, say, external sources, even like gurus and stuff like that. You know, it's quite self-empowering. Instead, you can connect with your own higher self, which is how it should be. I mean, you know, we've all been there where we I've been there, you know, follow a guru and you realize, okay, that's not quite for me. And you know,
well, that's, and in truth, you know, I mean, even you know, I mean, with the teaching, it's beautiful because you're teaching skills, you know, but even you know, I can share my knowledge and wisdom and my journey, but it's only my path. You know, and any guru that's out there, yes, we may learn along the way, but we can only ever really you know, explain our own story and our own experiences. And the whole point is we're all unique and individual. You know, how can consciousness learn of itself if it just made 8 billion of the same things, you know, on the same path? That's the whole concept of consciousness, you know, these infinite streams of consciousness, which is us, which we are, these beautiful, unique streams of consciousness that feed back into consciousness as a whole to expand the knowledge, the experience, you know, the evolution of consciousness itself. You know, if it just kept, you know, kind of cardboard cookie cutting out the same being, it would go against the grain of, you know, the greater concept of life itself, you know. But it's a bit more difficult to market that, I think, is really the issue.
I don't think people believe in themselves, so they do, like you said, they rely on that teacher to take them through the whole life. And actually, you know, the teacher's there to lead you to that self-empowerment, to show you that way, and then you can fly like a butterfly as such, you know.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. You know, it's to course correct, not to, you know, lead them down the path. It's just to say, oh, try over here, you know. And so you know, so the psychic development is obviously about really empowering the soul, but then it's about, you know, learning how to connect to the other forms of energy that are out there. You know, you know, the simplest form that most people do is, you know, when they do something like Reiki, you know, they connect to all universal healing power. You know, they call it in, and, you know, we have guides, we have loved ones, you know, and you know, when those energies, when we really learn to connect, you know, for me personally, especially with loved ones and people that we may have walked with in this life, or some of our guides, you know, the feeling, the actual physical sensation of the emotion of true unconditional love, I think, is something that all human beings should have the opportunity to experience once in their life. And I think when you truly get to feel that, I suppose in a sense it's addictive, because people just don't want to stop doing it. But it's not kind of, it's very different to the sort of the kind of high of manifesting stuff, you know, because it's not about stuff. And, you know, I think when we truly feel that emotion and that energy, and we understand what the universe is actually created from and what life is actually about, it just changes the way that we perceive all reality, you know, not in the sense that we kind of see things all over the thing, but just having that core inner standing of true unconditional love, and that we are observed by many beings in that form. You know, it shows us where we create our own boundaries, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting, because some people are scared of that, because they think, oh, you know, how do you know that the guide is your guide? How do you know that they're your friend? How do you know they're not leading you up the path? There's a lot of superstition around, and I think that's the difference between, I think, connect your soul connecting to source instead of connected to some sort of religious belief, which brings in superstition and fear, you know. And I think, you know, sometimes they can bring in that superstition and fear from others. I'm just talking generally of religions and stuff, you know. There's that, it's keeping us limited and kind of within that.
Well, they're the middlemen, you know. They're the kind of like, you can't speak to them, you've got to speak to me, and then I speak to them for you. And you know, so if you take out the middleman and say, no, this is direct connection, then what's left? No one's going to go to church or to temple if they know that they can get the same result in the kitchen, you know. So even when you look at the kind of history of a lot of religions, you know, I mean, monotheism, you know, the Catholic and Islam, and the, you know, the one true God. And when we look at, you know, religions such as Buddhism and you know, I think even Sikhism, Hinduism, you know, which is more polytheistic, you know, you see the cultural and societal kind of effects that has. And when you understand that a lot of these kind of original doctrines carry a lot of what would have made great common sense at that time when they were created, you can see how it's, you know, there's always been that aspect of kind of political agendas within these things. But I honestly feel, you know, as we move into a more feminine age, you know, the feminine energy is rising, we will move more towards those polytheistic religions again, where, you know, there is lots of many different deities for many different things, and it's, you know, it's more of something that can be done at home. You know, I think a lot of religion is, as with anything, you know, tainted by the concepts and ideals of patriarchy. And, you know, I think you can see that great shift now, you know, that a lot of people are moving away from the very kind of black and white concept of real and not real. I mean, I've been in this game a long time, you know, and, you know, I was, you know, I mean, people would laugh in my face when I talked to them, you know, 20 years ago. What do you do? Tell me, oh, what do you want to do that for? It's a load of rubbish. Like, oh, who told you that works? You know, and they'll be like, I'll be doing a degree. What, you can do a degree in that? Like, oh God, what's the world coming to? You know, and now I'm like, you know, the best thing since sliced bread, and everybody's tried acupuncture, and it's really cool, and it's, you know, it's really this and that, you know. So you see that it's, you know, people are becoming more open-minded to that, and I think that's that real shift in that space, is that more people are becoming aware again of the rhythms of nature, and, you know, that there is more to life than the 9 to 5, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's why people feel stuck sometimes or depressed, because they don't realise that they've fallen into that 9 to 5 trap. And that there is a way out. I think it's that sense of that's not really their true identity. Their true soul identity is not, oh, you know, I'm a financial advisor or I'm this and that.
Yeah, exactly. And but, you know, it's more the professional persona, isn't it? And there's a guy called Jeff Foster, who's Jim Carrey's, one of Jim Carrey's spiritual guys. And there's a thing, I think Jim Carrey did a reel on it, which is really beautiful, and it's a concept that he came up with. He said, you're not depressed, you need a deep rest from playing the character that you've created. You know, so it's the body and the mind saying, I don't want to play this person anymore. This isn't who I am. It's not my truth. And so that depression of, you know, not wanting to get out of bed, not wanting to get dressed, not wanting to go out in the world, is because the soul doesn't want to be that person anymore, you know. And yeah, you know, when you're young, there's not many pathways offered to you, you know, especially at school. You know, I think they suggested I go and work in a bank or something, you know, because I was quite good at maths. You know, and it's just, you know, these are the things that they offer, you know. And I remember thinking, like, well, is that it? Like, I was like 12 or 13 or something, maybe a bit older, you know, and you think, I'm not doing that, you know. So, you know, you can see in society that things are really starting to shift and change. You know, people are seeing outside that very rigorous kind of guidelines of what life is, you know. Perhaps we're not just born to work.
No, I think people are waking up now, which is good. And you did mention, like, you grew up with a family, obviously, that were practicing Chinese medicine. But obviously, I've experienced your gift of energy healing and everything. With your psychic development, like you said, your mum would say, don't say this, don't say that. Is that something that you've always had as a kid, that sort of natural gift? Because it feels very natural to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm very lucky in that sense that, I mean, I think we all have it as children, to be honest. It's really interesting when I start working with people, everyone suddenly at some point goes, do you know, when I was a kid, this happened. And when we think back, you know, everyone's had those experiences as a young child. But then we kind of thought, oh no, you're just making it up. But, you know, so because I didn't have that, because I had someone around me who was like, great, let's do this, I was allowed to kind of develop it. But it was, yeah, Mum was, you know, I think I remember telling the lady next door that her husband was going to leave, and she told me not to be stupid. And then he left, and I told her that he was going to leave with this woman up the road.
Wow.
Who used to come round and is so 1980s. She used to sell tights. So she used to come round on a Friday night with 2 big cardboard boxes full of tights and all different packs. Because it's 80s, isn't it? And I always remember we used to go, because my mum was obviously working in the hospital, and she had to wear tights with her uniform, and it was like, I don't know if they were knockoff or whatever, but they were cheap tights. And I remember we went to buy the tights, and he was in the kitchen with the tights lady, and I remember saying, "Oh, he's going to go and live with her, like next week."
Oh,
And
wow.
like, she was like, and I was 5, 6, really young. And I just remember my mother giving me this look of like death, like, and I was like, so I didn't say anything. And anyway, she kind of was like a bit, oh, that's a bit weird. And the next week he packed up and left with the tight, moved in with the tight lady. So there was a couple of examples like that. And I remember knowing when the next door but one's dog was going to pass and all of that sort of stuff. And I knew when people were going to die, like in a relatively short time.
Quite grim.
Yes and no, you know, because it was never in a, like, you didn't see them. I just got this feeling, and I just knew. And even now, you know, when I do work, I have this. I see people with this kind of arc of light, and I know wherever, like, if the arc is in front of them, then they're not in physical form, and if it's behind them, and if it's coming up and over them, then they're nearing transition.
Oh, wow. You can see that.
Yeah, you can see that in a lot of people. But you know, people say, oh, it's a bit grim, but actually as a healer, it's been a beautiful gift, because you know, the difficulty is in my own head, obviously, whether I decide to share that with people or not. But I'm in a position where people tend to ask, and not all the time, but there's been the odd one where, you know, I've had the opportunity to talk it through with them, and it's been a gift, because they've been, yeah, and you know, I can feel it. I know, you know, it's not like it's news to them most of the time. Yeah, I knew it. You know, and they can get their stuff together and get sorted. And I think for me, because, you know, I always have seen and spoke to those who are no longer here, you know, the concept of death is a very, very different thing to me. And, you know, there was one lady in particular, and it was absolutely beautiful experience. And she'd had a long and difficult life, and when she was passing in the end, she hadn't had any children herself. She was an only child. Both her parents had passed away. They hadn't been close, so she was kind of on her own. And I went and sat with her in the hospice and talked about my experience and how I saw everything and what was going on, and how I saw the spirit world, and you know that, you know, when she finally went, she could just call my name, and that part of me would come and take her hand and lead her through to the light, you know, and sat and talk about all of this and everything. And, you know, that was really, really beautiful to share that experience with her, and really bring that deep peace to her soul. But the really interesting thing was when I left, because it's just like curtains around the bed. And I was just on my way out, and there was a guy there, and he said, excuse me, and he was one of the people that worked at the hospice. And, you know, he came to me and he said, I've never heard it put so eloquently, but he said, it's so interesting, because he said, everything you've talked about, we see people go through that here all the time. And he said, it's really interesting to hear it from someone that, you know, can see and do all of that stuff, that you see it as well, you know. And he said, I wish we could talk to people more about all of that, you know, about people, family coming at the end and appearing, you know. So, and it's a very common thing when people pass, that the family come and collect them. So
It's beautiful.
yeah, no, it's an incredible thing. And I think, you know, it was an honor for me to be around people at that time as well. And, you know, it just, I mean, I guess that's part of this work and why people will always think you're so strange, because it's, you know, it's kind of the last taboo really that people want to talk about. But when we can understand life in that aspect and that concept and begin to communicate and connect with those souls, you know, for guidance, for connection, for healing, for whatever in life, you know, it completely changes the entire concept of what existence is. And, you know, it changes everything, because you begin to walk with the, you know, the eternal part of self, and that's a completely different journey. And, you know, there's no doubt or fear or anxiety in that space, which is good.
That's really good, because some people would feel that fear, wouldn't they? But the fact that you're so confident and reassuring in using your gift in helping people, you understand the source as well, that, you know, that where it's coming from, that's rarity in itself, compared with some people that I've met. So it's quite nice to hear that side.
Yeah. And this, I mean, mediumship is the same as anything else, you know. You know, there are many different kinds or ways of connecting, you know, and, you know, there are people that, you know, do demonstrations. A lot of people do that, and some of them are absolutely, I mean, some of the people I know are incredible, you know, but for me, that gift is always, and connecting with those aspects has always been more for a healing and guidance aspect for the person themselves, you know. I think the demonstrations are really good because it teaches people that it's real, and that it kind of gives them this evidential mediumship. You know, they give evidence, obviously. But, you know, for me, I think the beauty in that has always been the gifts and the healing that we can gain in our own lives, because it definitely, that's what it did for my life. You know, not really anxiety, but, you know, I always knew from very young, you know, even when we talk about the school thing, I was like, what the hell is this? Like, surely there's more to life than this. But, you know, it was always there. It wasn't like I got to kind of 25 and went, is this it? Like, literally from as young as I can remember, I was like, this is not how it's supposed to be. And I know it's not. There's something wrong here, you know. And I think for me, you know, that's part of really where the kind of rave music came from, and the dance music, because I remember going to the first thing like that, and it was all these people like dancing to the same music, and it was, you know, this incredible thing. And it was for the first time in my life I felt connected and I felt free, you know. And it was all these people doing the polar bloody opposite of what you were supposed to be doing, you know, which is being sensible and going to work. And that was the first time I felt like, yeah, this is what life is, you know, meant to be about. But obviously, it's, you know, everything else that goes along with it came along with it too. And so it wasn't really till I found, going back to the kind of psychic gifts and the spirituality and the development of that, and really building that pathway of communication and connection, that I find in that, when I'm in that space, the same feeling of freedom and joy, and I can be whoever I want to be and do whatever I want to do, you know, without all the accoutrement of dance music and the music scene. And I think, you know, that's kind of where it kind of came full circle for me. You know, I found what it was like, kind of emotionally and energetically on the dance floor, and then I kind of had to find myself again without all the additives.
So with your courses that you do now, I know that you have some courses that you run. What sort of courses are you offering now? And is there a link, actually, if you can put it in the notes thing? I'll see if I can.
I'll send you the thing for my Instagram. So I run a monthly membership called the Sacred Resistance. The Sacred Resistance being that part of us that, you know, is going, there's more to life than this, there's more to life than this, you know, the seeker part of us. So in that I teach more kind of magic, really. So not manifestation. That's
what
kind
sort of magic though? Because magic's quite a vague word.
No. So it is. So we do things like visualization training. So real, proper not like making a vision board, but like learning to hold shapes and like 3D and modeling in the mind to really be able to visualize and create, so that we can obviously create our own visions, so that we can hold visions when we connect to spirit. We do stuff that's, you know, about connecting to source, to spirit. We did last month, I have to think about these things myself. We did like color readings, teaching how to use color for developing psychic vision, you know, and how to kind of fall into the colors and begin to pick up the emotions and the messages and everything that's coming through. We did instant magic this month, which was all about creating little snaps of really high potency energy to change little things throughout the day. What else? Yeah, but we do, so it works each month. We do a live at the beginning of the month where we do I do like a training session on something we're going to do for the month, and then there's like I've got a little Telegram channel, so we drop little things in there every couple of days just to keep everyone going throughout the month. So we've got a month to practice it, and of course, you know, the people can ask all the silly questions in there, because the silly questions are the best. And then sort of halfway through the month, I do a catch-up session where I answer all the silly questions in depth. And then we do an integration. So I always do like a vision or a channeling or something like that to allow us to continuously be in flow with the universal energy. So it's all the kind of light codes and things. So we're all kind of, as a community, we work together. So there's that process that I do. I'm just in the process of starting a project, which I think will bring us on nicely to what it was that you wanted to talk about, which is the 12 chakras. So I'm just starting a project called Portals of Power, which is more of a kind of blog, sort of newsletter, mailing listy kind of thing. And that's, so Portals of Power is based on the kind of more esoteric aspects of all the acupuncture points. So actually using, you know, so we talk about there being 12 chakras, but, you know, yes, there are chakras outside of the body, but also every acupuncture point on the body is a chakra. And so, you know, it's obviously an unending source of information for me, because there's like 3,500 plus acupuncture points on the body. There's another 350, 400 on the ear. Then you've got like all the different systems, like scalp acupuncture, wrist and ankle acupuncture, balance acupuncture, abdominal acupuncture, you know, all the Jiao points. So Portals of Power is this process of learning all the points and the really deep esoteric spiritual aspects of them, and how they create and affect our existence. And so that will be going out, and I think that'll be, well, you know, like a Substack sort of thing. So there'll be a kind of freebie bit, and then there'll be a kind of paywall on it, and then there'll be all the deeper dive with all the real information in there as well. So that's going out. And then I do a mentorship for 3 months, which is called the Divine Edge, where I teach people how to connect to their guides, loved ones, safely, and how to begin to gain knowledge and information from them all the time. So, you know, they don't have to, if they've got a question, they don't have to go home and furiously meditate for 45 minutes to teach people to actually to be how they walk through their day, so that, you know, because it's great to be able to connect with these energies, but it's pointless if we have to go home and wait 3 hours for the answer. You know, it's teaching people how to use it in everyday life, so it becomes part of who they are, and you know, they can, you know, walk with the divine, or you know, just surrender to the flow, however. But it gives people that opportunity to, that's really kind of shifts their reality a bit. So that's the kind of deeper work.
It's amazing. Wow. Yeah. I'm definitely going to roll on some of them. I'm telling you now, it's coming. It's
yeah. Well, yeah, I should tell you yeah. So the Sacred Resistance is £22, and the Substack will be 11. The Divine Edge is a bit more because you get a lot more of me, because you get kind of support all the time. So that's 1111 for 3 months. So, but I think it was
mentorship and everything.
That's a one-to-one mentorship, yeah. So that's a really, really deep dive into stuff, yeah.
And do you, in these sort of in the mentorship, do you also sort of teach how to protect ourselves as well when doing this?
Well, yeah, to a certain extent. You know, the way that I work is that everything that you're connecting to is what protects you.
Okay, that's interesting.
You know, so I think, you know, it's a very dualistic concept that we need protecting from ourselves. But, you know, especially when it comes to loved ones, you know, most of them are family members. They're people that we knew very well in life. So they're never going to, they're the ones that are always protecting us, even when we're not doing it. And obviously your guides and guardians are the same. So the whole concept of this piece of work is that when you're in connection and communication with these, it's that itself that protects you, because you suddenly, when they're all going, stop, no, you can hear them. Yeah. So, you know, I think that's where the real delineation comes in, because people talk about, oh, you know, like you need to you know, have protection. You know, if you're going to walk into a graveyard and open up your energy field, then yeah, you may pick up some negative energies. You know, there are people in this world who you know, through magic, you know, and I've had the you know, the time and the joy to study with a lot of great people now, you know, who create energetic forms and don't tidy up after themselves, so to speak. And there are people who dabble in things, you know, that cause problems. Again, you know, if you want to get into that, then people can get into that. But you know, you know, the beings and the souls that you know, I connect people with are the protection. So it's, you know, it's not the concept that you need to protect yourself more from what's trying to protect you. You need, the more you build the communication throughout the process, the more you protected you become. Because when you're not, you know, they're, you know, when they're kind of over here a bit, or they, you know, you suddenly, because you're in that space and that energy, you begin to pick up on all the signs, and you see what you need to see, and you're like, oh, that spirit's showing me, right, what does that mean? You know, and you know how to ask the, you know, well, why are you showing me that? You know how to ask the questions, you know how to hear the answers, you understand what is the truth. And it's, you know, we get to the point where, oh, it's not just your mind making you up. Yeah, this is what I need to do. So that's where that certainty comes from. You know, so people talk a lot about, you know, protection, but that's, you know, when people are kind of dabbling a bit, really, because they're not really aware. You know, you get all these people that do like paranormal things and all that sort of stuff. And if you want to go and look for that sort of stuff, then, you know, help yourself. I'm not coming.
I tend to stay away.
Yeah, you know, but even myself, you know, I'm not, it doesn't bother me, because, you know, there's so many times now, you know, where I've been in situations and all of a sudden I just get everything, just, you know, my spidey senses, supposed to talk, also start going off 10 to the dozen, and I'm like, we just need to get out of here now. And you know, fortunately, you know, my husband and most people that know me are just like, can't say we need to get out of here now. And every time it's been right, you know, and that's from that energy. It's the signs from those people. And, you know, so, you know, I think when people talk about protection, it's about not getting attachments on you in that sense, you know, but in the sense that, you know, if anything untoward like that happened, you're in connection with something in a similar energetic form that can just go like, yeah, you need to go and get rid of this. But most of the time, they're not even going to get to that point, you know. But a lot of the time, we're, again, you know, it's part of the superstition and it's part of the fear thing. And it's the part of the, you know, you need a gift, you need this, you need that, you know, and it's that it forms the doubt, it forms the belief that, you know, you have to have a gift, you have to do this, you have to do that, you know. And I've done a lot of work, you know, I've done a lot of remote viewing, I've done a lot of psychic work, I've, you know, studied to great extent Enochian magic, you know, and Egyptian magic, chaos magic, and I've, you know, Taoist shamanism, you know, I've done a lot of stuff with indigenous people in America. And, you know, several bookshelves by my side of books as well, you know, as studies. And obviously I've done several years now of mediumship development, trance mediumship, trance healing, all this kind of work. And, you know, as yet, I've never really met anyone that's suffered from that.
I remember when, because obviously 3 years ago I broke my ankle, clean break, bone broke, and everyone at the hospital, the physio, was saying, "Oh, your life's never going to be the same again." And then I went to see you for some energy work, some energy healing. Great, now I can play football now, I can dance, whatever I want. But I remember when you was treating me, and obviously it was that, I think it was a year after my dad passed as well, which hit me hard. And I remember you saying that my dad's with me right now, with part of the healing and stuff. And that really touched my heart, because I really wanted him to be with me, and he was, you know, in that sense. And it was
they are.
And I do believe as well, I've let him go, don't get me wrong, I know he's in a great place, but I also know he's still with me, because every time I see a robin, it reminds me of my dad. And last week, it was in consecutively, one day I saw one robin, then the next day I had 2 robins in the garden, then the following day 3 robins together, and I've never seen that before.
He's trying to tell you something.
I think he's trying to tell me, he is trying to tell me something, actually, but maybe he's trying to tell me that, you know, he's proud of me and keep doing what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? And today as well, just came in my face, a robin.
But, you know, I mean, that's the beauty of it. You know, 99% of the time they're here to tell us how much they love us, you know. And, you know, I always remember that there was one of my teachers, you know, and he talked about his connection with his mother, you know, and she was, you know, she said, we're there all the time. You know, she said all those, and especially all those birthday parties, you know, the celebrations, the family celebrations. And she said, do you know how frustrating it is for us in spirit that no one realises that we're there? You know, and I think that's one of the things that people don't think about, is that they're constantly trying to connect to you. They're constantly, you know, we see, we're like, oh, I've seen angel numbers everywhere. I've seen it. I mean, can you imagine if you're in spirit and you're going like, you know, 7, like in someone's face all the time, and they're just like, oh, that's nice, and then just carrying on with their day, you know. So, you know, I think what's fascinating when we make, you know, when people get these connections, is you just realise how much they are there, and the energy is always there and it's always available. And it's just an incredible resource that we're missing out on in life. And, you know, people say, oh, you know, I think, you know, so-and-so is with me. Sometimes I'm like, they're there all the time. They're there all the time.
And it, you know, it doesn't mean they haven't crossed or they haven't gone.
No, it doesn't mean they haven't crossed at all. You know, it means you know, they're watching over you. You know, they want to be with you. They, you know, if there's one thing that doesn't die, it's love. You know, the love that we have for each other. You know, grief in itself, you know, is that, you know, that all that love that we've still got to give, and we're like, that person's gone in the physical, we can't give it to them anymore. You know, so it's the kind of, it's the stemming of that flow of love when we feel grief is like, you know, and it stops us in our tracks. It's like the rest of the world moves on and we're just stood there wondering how people are, you know, like, how are you doing this? You know, going for a walk, you know, or going to the shop. How are you doing? Like, we're just, you know, freeze frame. So, you know, it allows us that love, that energy, it allows us to reconnect that and the flow to continue. You know, and that's a beautiful and incredible thing. You know, and the wonderful thing is, you know, a lot of people, when they do pass, you know, and when people connect to them again, you know, the majority of the time as well, it's, you know, to explain things that they did in life or to help people understand life themselves. They really help us understand life. You know, because they can see that bigger picture, and, you know, so they're connected to that soul element, you know. And yeah, you know, you get the odd person, that the odd energy that won't cross over, you know, but there's usually a reason for that, some unfinished business.
Yeah, they call it ancestral distress, which can cause us havoc as well, because obviously we've got ones that can help us and ones that can't, and maybe they need help or support to you know, to help.
Yeah, but you'll find, you know, I mean, you know, as much as loved ones, you know, you'll find that you'll get, you know, most people find that when their connection gets good and gets strong, they get a lot of people that, you know, were, you know, walked as humans but aren't necessarily family. You know, so you know what we understand when, you know, when we teach people to connect properly, is that, you know, the energies need to match. You know, so, you know, you'll have people in your family where they're just like, you know, that have passed, that are generations ago, that are just like, what on earth are you up to? Like, that's just weird. Like, and you just can't work with them, you know, because the energy has to match for there to be that connection. You know, so it's much easier for people that have walked with us in this lifetime to make that connection, because they understand it. It's like a fingerprint, they can recognize us. But, you know, there are lots of other energies. And so sometimes, you know, you'll get people or souls or beings that are the kind of in-betweens as well, you know, that have perhaps worked with another medium or worked with other people before, you know, and sometimes you'll find that, you know, in the beginning when you're you know, you're helping people, there'll be someone who's got someone who's, you know, always close to them, but in spirit, but they may not be used to communicating. So, you know, we have to give them space and allow them to learn to speak. They need to get to know how to do it as much as you need to get to know how to do it.
Okay.
You know, these are your friends, and you're making a friendship. You know, so, you know, when you first meet someone, you have to get to know them, you know, and then you have to understand, you know, do they like to send an email or do they like to send a text message? You know, how do they like to communicate? You know, what have they got to say? What do they mean with when they say this? You know, like when we do some of the work for colour, you know, say someone sees colour red, you know, red can mean a myriad of different things to different people. You know, it means love, it means danger, it means fire, it means, you know, passion. It's Chinese New Year soon, you know, red is everywhere, you know, so it's, you know, there's so many different ways of communicating and doing it. And when we begin to realise that these are our friends, you know, it makes you realise that there's just so much we've been taught to put on it, you know, about, oh, this is this and this is that and that is this. You know, it's people like to make a lot of rules and regulations, I think.
Yeah, you're right. And yeah, Yeah, I'm glad you're here to talk about that, because it kind of makes sense when you explain it without bringing down fear in people, you know, of the unknown, because people are scared of the unknown, and I think, you know, and I think a lot of it is about you as well. What's your vibration? Because, you know, low vibration can't attach to high vibration, you know, and it's like love is the
Yeah,
highest form.
exactly. Yeah.
It can't come near you. If you're full of love, it just can't come near you. So there's nothing to be scared of. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. You know, and it's the same as it is, you know, if you walked into town and, you know, someone's like, you know, some guy's half, you know, drunk out his head on the market square with his top off, shouting his head off. Like, you're not going to go over and go like, oh, hi, I'm Babita, do you want to hang out? You know, and it's exactly the same in spirit. You know, that's the thing. You know, there's so much mystery and like around it. You know, that people have built it up into this big thing. You know, and you know, especially when it's family and friends, they're just the same. You know, it's so funny because people, you know, they'll ask them something and they'll, oh, I asked them this and they said this. And I'm like, well, what would they have feel like? They said, oh, well, they'd have said that. And I'm like, well, then that's what they're going to say. Yeah, but I wanted them to say this. It's like, look, if they weren't like into you doing that when they were around, they're not going to be suddenly like, oh, great idea now. You just don't want to hear it. You know, excuse me. So it's the personality that really comes through for people. And I think that's the beauty of it. You know, to me, it's been the final piece of the puzzle, and it's really allowed me to begin to exist in a different sense, you know. And like I said, you know, find that freedom for one thing, but you know, it's just it just allows me to walk differently, I think, you know, and you know, it's brought all the magic and miracles back to my life that I felt were torn away from me as a child, you know.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about the chakras, which I thought would be quite nice, which will bring us on to the flow of the 16 chakras, which we studied at one of your courses.
Yeah.
It was in 2018. I remember doing this meditation, and it was beautiful and powerful. And also, I wasn't aware of these 16 chakras, and also of the Earth Star chakra, which is 18 inches below our feet.
Yeah.
And then 18 inches above the crown chakra. You know, we've got 5 other sort of chakras, which goes into kind of an interdimensional galactic sort of space. And that, I guess it's kind of, have you heard of Keylontic science?
No.
That is beautiful too. It's quite, I'm kind of reading Voyages at the moment. I'll send you a link. I think you'll like it. Keylontic science. It talks about the 12 dimensional states, interdimensional states, galactic states, and the gate portals and stuff like that. It gets a bit deep. But could you give us an overview of this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as we were saying earlier, you know, there are many chakras in the systems, but this is when we look at the concept of really kind of tapping into the realms of consciousness. So then, you know, there are all the acupuncture points, you know, and I think in Ayurveda is the Mum Acupuncture, you know, so there's 108 points they have, you know, the Chinese have just expanded on it. And so when we look at these chakra systems, these chakras that are outside of the body is how we connect to the layers of consciousness and existence itself. So as you see, you've got like the earth star. So that's actually, you know, deep within the earth itself, you know. So we do, you know, I think a lot of people when they do meditation, they talk about growing roots down into the ground and into the earth. But this is our kind of anchor into everything. And I know a lot when we do, you know, when I teach people this, and sometimes I use this when people are on the couch when I'm doing work, just to ground them into into the field before they get up at the end, and they're all like, oh, and, we connect them in, and you can actually see people's toes and feet kind of start to curl and kind of point towards it. It's really a fascinating thing. And so obviously, there are the dimensional layers as we all are, and we talked about this concept of the kind of infinite streams of consciousness itself and how we are all connected to them. So when we begin to expand the chakra system out and we get into these higher and higher regions, and I think people really, you could kind of feel it almost fizzing, can't you, on the top of the head when we start to get into them, is where the kind of real answers to life lay. So when we look at the concept of this, from a more of a Chinese medicine perspective, even, there's a beautiful saying that really upsets a lot of acupuncturists, which is that physical healing is the lowest form of healing. So, what we're talking about is the concept of dis-ease, and being on the path. So, we are this infinite stream of consciousness, like wandering around in the cosmoverse, as this form of energy. And so, if we, from a very high point up, so we're like looking at 16 here. I mean, we can go higher and higher and higher. I mean, that there are, when we do like orthobionomy, and we really start to work far away from the body. You've got 35 layers of the aura that you're beginning to work with there before you even start opening people's energetic chakras. So, you can go further and further out. But, so these higher ones, when we look at kind of 12 and 11, which is the higher states of consciousness, when these are out of, well, all the ones kind of above the head, when these are out of alignment, so to speak, or they're not spinning the right way, or they're blocked, or there's too much energy there, or blah, 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 it begins to cause that dis-ease. It shifts us off the energetic pathway where we're coming out of flow. If we don't deal with something at that level, then it will eventually, when it's compacted in energetic form, become an emotional issue.
Right.
Yeah, because the dis-ease, the compression of it becomes an emotional issue. So then we kind of start looking, more, and we know, towards the crown chakra, the third eye. Here we would probably even take in like kind of the eighth, the kind of the just above the heads, these layers here. So if you imagine, this kind of stream of information comes from above, and it's kind of coming out, and it's condensing and condensing and condensing, and then eventually it gets to the point where it's condensed so much it begins to become into physical form. That's how condensed the energy is. And then when we understand within ourselves, and the concept of the main chakras that most people are aware of is that then it gets into that physical state. And then when we look, when we go deeper down and we go, into the kind of down into the knees and down into the earth star, that's the real anchoring of it all. So that's almost the kind of the other point of it. So the energy comes through all the way in here, but then as well, it kind of comes through the condensation of the physical body, and then it begins to kind of break a little again as it comes into earth energy. It's a different kind of density, because obviously we can walk on the earth, so we don't fall through it, so therefore the earth is denser than we are. So this is where, where the anchor of it is and where it pulls at the bottom. So again, if that's empty and it's dragging everything through too fast, or it's, full, or you can't anchor, then again, life comes like out of sorts because we're not connected on through all that way down. So you can see here the kind of the aspects of the infinite consciousness and how it comes down into earth consciousness, which is denser than us. And then it travels obviously down into the core of the earth and continues if we want to. But for most people, the 16 that we have here is enough to start on and to expand on to begin with. but it really, when we can meditate, and I think you've done that with me, where we go through the process and I explain what's sitting within each energetic layer and how it presents itself in our kind of path and our journey. When we can begin to get a glimpse of what's going on in there, and release or surrender to or heal or align those energies, however it may be that they need us to attend to them in that moment.
Is this kind of like what you would call as well around the biofield?
Yes, yeah. So it's very, so bioautonomy, biofield, energetics, it would be very similar to that. People will work, and again, they'll expand on that system as well. But yeah, so this is, all the, in Chinese medicine is the holographic theory. I think it's not Dan Keown, I can't remember who that's, maybe Lonnie Jarrett. But yeah, there's, a lot of talk about, being the hologram of everything. So yeah, but it's a beautiful system. And I think nowadays, where people are very much, I see very much at the minute that in the kind of system that's around, that people are becoming obsessed with the concept of healing, where they're kind of almost obsessed to the point where they think there must consistently be something wrong with them. So, they're just going from one healing journey into the next. And that's a real misalignment of those higher chakras, because when we become aligned with them, we realize that there's nothing to heal.
Yeah. Interesting.
There's nothing wrong with you. It's just a belief or a perception in itself. And when we understand that there's nothing to heal, then we can really come back to it. I was giggling I saw, a very good description of that, or thing. I saw a funny meme the other day on Instagram, where you had some guy in like jeans and a t-shirt, and he was like, when you get to that point in your spiritual journey where you start wearing normal clothes again. It's like, and like, obviously, I have my own choice in fashion, but I never really fell for the outfit in the first place. I had a lot of people just, well, you don't look spiritual.
What does spiritual look like?
Yeah, that's it. Do you know what I mean? Sorry, mate. But it's that concept, that even with our own healing, we can get caught within our own healing. And it's those infinite loops
interesting.
that can be stemmed within this space.
Sort of like a trap, isn't it? It can be a bit of a trap. Then the spiritual ego as well, that can be quite
yeah, but that's the ego, and that doesn't exist within these spaces. So once we get out of our head, it's much easier for us to see the truth within those things.
This is what when we're talking about these 16 chakras, the biofield, this is what I love about these tuning forks, because they really do get things moving as well around the
yes,
sound.
no, they do. Yeah. And I have a very good friend who's love tuning forks, and it's like one of the.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, I love a good tuning fork session.
So it saved my life, honestly, for like 2 years. I've been using it, 3 years. Just the best thing I've invested in is that I'm understanding all of this. But this is brilliant. Thank you so much, Kat, for sharing this and taking us through. Do you feel like now would it be nice to kind of close the session with you giving us a spirit-led meditation?
We'll do what I think would be really nice, actually, because I've been thinking about it, is there's a really, really simple meditation. I thought, we could do that, but that's pretty deep. So I thought we'd do a gentle process that anyone can tap into, because I do find sometimes people get a bit nervous about meditation. So I always just think it's nice to go into a lovely space and be able to relax. So we'll do a little something now. So I'll just invite anyone who's watching and who's joined us to take a deep breath and just allow the mind to settle. And just get the energy to drop down from the mind into the belly. And just to take anything, any experiences, people, moments, thoughts, situations from the day. And just in your mind to imagine that you're quietly ushering them to the door of the room that you're in. And with loving kindness, you're asking them to leave and closing the door behind them. And taking some permission to spend this time with self. And I just want you to think, feel, or imagine you find yourself within a woods or a forest, and you're sat within a clearing. And you can see up above the trees. You can hear the wind blowing through the leaves. You can smell the earth soft underneath you. The temperature is perfect for you. And with every breath, you begin to feel yourself getting lighter and lighter. And eventually you begin to realize that you are so light, you are beginning to float. First you are an inch above the ground, then a foot, and then a meter, completely weightless, completely held, completely safe. And still you continue to float on upwards. You find yourself passing through the boughs of the tree and up into the treetops. And now you are above the tree line. And still you continue to float. You begin to see the edges of the forest. You begin to see the towns and cities that surround it. You begin to see where the land meets the oceans, the edges of the country. And still you continue to rise through the clouds and up you go, out into space. The beautiful silence, the vastness, the limitlessness. And you turn back and see the entirety of planet Earth, our incredible blue planet. And you continue still. The moon, the planets of the galaxy come into vision. The galaxy shrinks and shrinks until you can see the entire Milky Way. And still you continue to float. Right to the edge of existence. To the edge of the imagined reality. And when you reach this space, the very edge of everything, you just take one step beyond. What is it that you find there? What is it that comes to greet you? Beyond everything that you ever imagined you knew. Perhaps it is everything. Perhaps it is nothing. Whatever it is just right. And now you find yourself once more back within all existence, the Milky Way, as if painted across the sky in front of you. Slowly you begin to float back down. You see in the distance planets of the galaxy begin to appear. You see the moon and our beautiful blue planet. And as you float slowly through the clouds, you see where the lands meet the oceans once more. You begin to see the towns and cities. You begin to see the edges of the forest. And eventually you see the clearing. You float gently down to the tops of the trees and land gently from exactly where you left. And yet this time, everything seems a little different, a little clearer. You feel a little lighter. And you understand that something, however minute, has changed. And so slowly you begin to become aware of the room in which you are sat. As you become aware of the room, you become aware of the chair that you are sat on. And as you become aware of the chair, you become aware of the body. You allow the breath to deepen. Perhaps bring a simple stretch, a wriggle of the toes or fingers, a roll of the shoulder. And when you are ready, for there is no rush, you can open your eyes.
Wow. You know, it made me feel like everything is so small here, everything is irrelevant, and that there's so much more. It made everything like...
Yeah, and that's the adventure. You know, life's an adventure, and you know, that's, I guess, what, you know, I really want to do for people is take them on adventures. And you know, all of those spaces that we've been to is somewhere that we can really get to know well and learn to navigate and traverse and to understand. So yeah,
I don't know if you can hear my dog snoring, but he's completely...
I know, yeah, no, mine's going for it as well. They love the energy, they pick up on it. Yeah, so I mean, I hope that helps, and I hope that's been of
that was so lovely
use to you. Yeah, and I hope it helps people as well. I hope they enjoy it.
That was brilliant, and I'll make sure to put your details down, your social media and your course details. Do you have a website? as well?
I've got landing pages. You know, I'm not. Well, it's not that I'm super techie. It's just that I can't. I find it easier just to build them because it's just me.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I think I'll do all that so people know where to find you and that, and the Tenzil horses as well, and get the benefit that they need from it. Thank you so much, Kat. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It was lovely to catch up.